also to our main subject for our conversation this morning, and that's lessons learned from the recent Uyo church building collapse and, of course, safety of mega structures. But before then, let's listen to Ngozi Chude's background report.
Everybody was seated, including the governor and the dignitaries, they all seated. I heard a sound. I thought it was rain. Thing was falling. I heard, and it was just at the center.
It was a gloomy day for Nigerians following the deaths of a number of people due to the unfortunate incident of a church building collapse during an ordination service in Uyo, Akwa Ibom State on the 10th of December 2016. In its wake were the usual investigation, opinions, and suggestions. However, the unfortunate incident leaves a bitter pill, considering that this has been a recurring issue in recent times. Records show that several cases have been recorded in the last 10 years, leaving in its toll hundreds of casualties. Till date, the worst building collapse incident was on September 12, 2014, when a crowded six-story guest house belonging to the Synagogue Church of All Nations in Lagos collapsed, trapping about 300 people and leaving scores dead. Unfortunately, the aftermath left little to be desired, as controversies trailed the incident, leaving no room for proper investigation and appropriate sanction against erring professionals, one issue that seemed to be the antecedent in Nigeria. In addition, experts attribute the causes of structural failure in Nigeria to a number of other factors, which they highlight as the absence of soil test reports, structural designs by quacks, lack of coordination between the professional bodies and the local town planning authority, use of unskilled personnel, and substandard building materials, among others. In fact, the situation worsens with the poor state of the economy, forcing greedy professionals to take advantage of prospective building owners while leaving professional ethics by the corner. With the obvious stakes of the professional, a one-time past president of the Nigerian Institution of Structural Engineers said the central objective of a building structure is safety and economy. Therefore, it says for a structure to withstand all the forces of nature, three major components should be identified. These, it says, include the professional behind the structure, materials used for the structure, and the techniques adopted for the structure. This obviously highlights the importance of professionals and regulatory bodies in seeing to the fact that these standards are followed to the letter and adhered to. However, oftentimes, these professional bodies, such as Nigerian Institute of Architects, the Nigerian Society of Engineers, and the planning authorities, who also represent the government, sharing the blame of the incessant building collapse. The Uyo saga opened up fresh wounds, but experts say for these to be reduced to the barest minimum, actions must be taken in the area of stringent penalties for those responsible in the collapse of buildings, effective monitoring of projects during and after construction, members of the building industry to be kept abreast with new trends in construction, and government to provide an enabling law for the training and effective control of artisans and craftsmen in the industry. Other areas include construction work to be carried out by registered contractors and supervised by registered architects, engineers, and builders, including government, to intensify public enlightenment. The list may seem endless, but the question remains, why has this been a major issue, and how effectively can safety be ensured in building structures in Nigeria? These and more will build the focus on Good Morning Nigeria today.
All right, Ngozi Chude, thank you very much there for that background report. Now, we've been joined here in the studios by a number of guests. First, we'd like to welcome Architect Umar Aliyu, who is President, Architect Registration Council of Nigeria, ARCON. Architects, it's a pleasure to have you on Good Morning Nigeria. All right, and then we also have with us here another fellow familiar face on the program, is President of the Council for the Regulation of Engineering in Nigeria. It's Engineer Kashim Ali. Engineer Ali, it's a pleasure once again to have you join us.
It's a pleasure, thank you very much.
Okay, let me also quickly welcome Dr. Onimode Bandele. He's Deputy Director, Search and Rescue, NEMA, as well as former Zonal Coordinator, Southeast, South and Southwest Zones. like to thank you very much for joining us.
It's my pleasure. Good morning.
And from our Lagos studio, we have been joined by Professor Martin Dada. He's Vice Chairman, Council of Registered Builders of Nigeria. Professor Dada, thank you very much for joining us this morning.
Good morning, Nigerians.
All right, well, gentlemen, let's begin this conversation. I mean, the point that we had in our news story this morning, and something that has also been raised by way of observation. When a structure is under construction, what are the requirements for movement in and out, or even encampment in such a structure under construction? Let's begin with Engineer Ali.
Thank you very much. You know, in the profession, there is this regimentation. In fact, like, which is derivative of even what the military does. You know, like in a military barrack, for instance, when the military operation is going on, the commander takes charge, determines who comes in and who goes out. It is the same thing with a typical engineering project, for instance. Like even a highway. When a highway is being constructed, the chief resident engineer, who is the engineer's representative, takes responsibility for whatever happens within that space. He determines who uses that road and who does not, because anything that happens will be covered by the insurance cover for the whole project. It's not normally, because it's not a road that is normally in operation. It's the same thing in a building project. Once there's a building project, also a project at all, and you now put a barricade at the entrance, the person in charge of that project takes responsibility of who comes in and who goes out, and at what time and in what condition. What car do you drive in? Because depending on the sensitivity of the car, you know, the project can say certain cars cannot come in because they will cause explosion. You say what somebody will need to wear to come in, whether he needs protective boots, he needs a protective headgear, and all the rest. All those are standard practices. Those are covered under the environmental, what do we call this, environmental safety condition that you must meet. And anybody who is even coming at the entrance, they're supposed to also do a housekeeping job for the person by telling, these are the places you can go to, this is what you can do, this is where you can escape to in the event of an emergency. All those things are procedural. Unfortunately, we take some of these things for granted in most cases, unfortunately.
Okay, let me also ask, within the law, current law, is it also permissible for a building under construction to be used as venue for an event?
No, certainly no. Because it's a danger onto even the workers there. That is why they have to wear protective dressing. So why would you bring anybody who is not trained? Because you, like I said earlier, you will call a muster point. You must have a muster point even within your site. That if this happens, this is what you do. If you hear this sign, somebody has to give an alert, either by blowing a whistle or by banging something, and you must move all to this place for evacuation. So in that case, how do you bring in people who have not gone through that process? It's totally unacceptable.
All right, Engineer, thanks. Let's get the views of Architect Umar Leo on these 2 points. You know, what are the precautions to take when a building is under construction, as well as the right or denial of ingress and egress from such a structure that is moving in and moving out. Sorry, I was speaking low.
Well, as stated by the current president, the procedure is exactly the same. Safety first, and the students, school, and public enlightenment to ensure safety of life and property.
All right, thanks. I just would like Professor Martin Dada at our Lagos Network Center to also speak to this. Professor Dada, you've listened to 2 of our guests here in the studios. What's your comment on this, with particular reference also to what we see to be common, even though in some cases there are also breaches? When a building or a structure is under construction, there is some perimeter fence. You know, it could be made of tin plate, you know, or some other thing to keep persons away. Why is that done, and why is it that in some cases, you know, the place is just an open field, people walk in and walk out?
Thank you. is a function of the premium we place on human lives. When we know that a human life is irreplaceable, then we'll come to realize that the most important person on any project for that matter is the human being. Now, we actually prefer not to have a situational ad hoc approach. There is a full-orbed approach. The issue of managing a building project during construction, just like the current president said and the ACOM president said, there is somebody responsible in the site. There is somebody who is managing the production of the building, who is trained as an expert to manage the production. And part of what he does ordinarily to complement the designs of the other professional to get a good project that is safe during construction and after construction, one of the documents he prepares or is supposed to prepare is the project health and safety plan. So the project health and safety plan makes it such that we are not just reactive. We have planned ahead. We have looked at the risks. We have looked at, there's something we call attractive nuisance. For example, if a project is going on, some people may just want to be looking at it. It's your responsibility, the responsibility of the builder in charge of the project, to see that that project is ordered, to see that ingress and
quality, you know, is it a major factor?
Thank you. Well, I hope I'm going to understand the use of your word foundational, either grammatical or technical. If it's the technical aspect, in which case we're talking of the foundation of the building, okay? If it is foundational in a philosophical, grammatical sense, but then there are many factors. That is correct. Foundation is a major issue. I mean, so normally a whole gamut of factors come to play to either contribute to the collapse of structures. Yes, the topic is actually on mega structure, but I want to first of all even give something. There is not only mega structures that collapse and kill people. Ordinary fence can collapse and kill people. We have had instances of breakaway septic tank being excavated, and the ark falls on people, and the people die. So the issue is not even the issue of structure. And I'm afraid when we look at our country, Nigeria, we are saying some things are mega structure. I think we have to think beyond them. If you have a 30-story building in Nigeria now, people will think it's high-rise. But in some climes, that's not high-rise. So the issue is whether it is mega structure or not mega structure, some basic things need to be done. The soil under which the soil condition matters, because the soil ultimately is what is going to carry the load. Our engineers do that. The geotechnical engineers handle that. The structural engineers, then they design after they have calculated their load. Then after that, other people have their inputs, but it is at the construction stage that we are having challenge. The challenge oftentimes is we know that a building cannot collapse on paper. It cannot collapse in computer. It can only be by computer simulation. If it does, it's not going to wound people. It's not going to kill people. But the collapse is during the construction stage. But the challenge now is that in our country, construction is regarded as an all-comers affair. The people live in, as if many people live in pretense, as if there is no law regulating the technology of construction. And the beautiful aspect is this: all of us in the industry work as a team. The engineer does his own, the architect does his own, the QS, the builder does his own, to give a safe product. And may I say this, expert power is not conferred on people by democracy. It's not by voting, it's by expertise. So if 10 patients are in an hospital and a medic, and they have to vote among them that who is going to do surgery, if they elect a patient or somebody who is familiar with hospital to go and do the surgery, even though that's democracy, but that is celebration of ignorance. That's not expert power. So I think the issue we need to address in our country is how do we really handle this issue of construction. But the beautiful aspect is that we have got the National Building Code, that all the professional bodies, the regulatory bodies came together, and it's like a document that this is how we're going to be operating. It's a sad commentary in our country, in our national life, that since 2006, the bill for the enforcement of the provisions of the code has not been, the law has not been enacted. As a matter of fact, many states too have not domesticated it. For how long are we going to cry that we lost life? How many more lives are we going to lose before things are done the right way? And as I heard in the preamble, many of the problems in building collapse
in Nigeria and so on and so forth. We'll come back to you in the course of this conversation. We still have Dr. Onimode Bandele, is Deputy Director in charge of Search and Rescue for NEMA. We will ask him to just pause in the meantime and listen first to the technical aspects before we come to issue of search and rescue. All right, and that's why we're returning now to Engineer Kashimale. Kuren was reported to have dispatched a team to you to ascertain what exactly went wrong. Can we have an idea of the preliminary reports that may have been submitted?
Well, we don't have a full preliminary report yet. As a matter of fact, ordinarily, there are places we can get information from like the building, what they call it, the remote control unit of the government, to see who is the consultant on this project, who is the contractor, at least to give us official report. Incidentally, when they got there, there's no record of any approval of that structure, so they don't have formation. But we are going through all that, because we do also have an alliance with ICPC. We want to call up that now, because once there's no information in the public space in where we should find them, then we'll begin to ask people who can get information from wherever it is. We should have, because we want to be thorough. We have had an experience that is embarrassing to us. The synagogue thing was very embarrassing to us as a country, because at a time like this in our life, to hear that a structure, simple structure like that will collapse, it's an embarrassment to the level of engineering in Nigeria. But of course, the case is in court now, so I'm not talking about, at least we have people in court now that they are being tried for that, because that was something that was not properly done. This one also is similar in the manner, because you see, I've not seen it, but I've seen all these pictures and everything. Clear span of about 65 meters is quite a big facility. For it to be done again in
sometimes you find stop work. What does that mean? Because most times work continues.
It's the arrogance of the typical Nigerian rich person. I had the privilege, unfortunate one at this, to investigate a collapsed structure in Abuja, in around the Jabi axis, a mall that collapsed that time. When we were doing the investigation, before we could commence, all the information relating to the individual, the owner of the property of the company, had been removed from even CAC. Their file was missing in CAC. When the lawyers went there to find out who is the owner of this company, they couldn't get. They claimed the engineer was on site, was killed in the incident. So at the end of the day, we couldn't.
There was no evidence of the body.
There was no evidence of the person who died, whom we knew died. The way he looked, he couldn't have been the engineer, certainly. But again, they say that is the engineer. And they gave his name as that. Unfortunately, he has somebody's name here. I don't want to call it. So
it could have been Kingsley.
So, but this is what happened to us. So when we did that, we found that we couldn't get investigation. So whom were you going to prosecute? At the end of the day, the people we indicted were officials of government who were supposed to be monitoring, that is government control. They were punished administratively. But coming to your first question as to whether there's been anyone who have really concluded, we have not been able to conclude. We had incidents, in fact, the very early ones were in River State, in Port Harcourt. There's a case of a building that was being put up by a nurse, and he was in a hurry to get it done. When they cast the first floor, he wanted to go on to the next one and said they started loading the floor with concrete blocks in preparation for the next floor. And the engineers told them to stop that. So he said he was resigning from the job. He resigned. So it collapsed. So because the owner of the property wasn't an engineer, there was nothing we could do. But we asked the government of Rivers State to prosecute, but they didn't. Because usually those who get involved in these things are always powerful people.
What about the Lekki incident?
The Lekki is still going on. The Lekki is not coming. You know, this thing takes a lot of time to get people to even accept their own fault. Like the synagogue, you know, even yesterday we got a court process stopping us from our own investigation.
All right.
So
we'll still keep that subject, Engineer Kashim Ali. That's the synagogue matter. And then let's bring in Dr. Onimode Bandilin, our Deputy Director of Search and Rescue of NEMA. Let's take a look at this. The casualty figure from Uyo, some 29 persons officially. The synagogue, some 120, and then occasionally, I mean, you have tens or fewer numbers of persons who are dying. But in places where you have large congregation, what should be the protocol for, safety? Dealing with safety, I wouldn't want to ask security, but safety in an emergency such as Engineer Ali talked about. If, there was an exigency, an emergency, how should persons respond? And even before you allow such persons to congregate, what is the obligation of, the organizers of such a convocation or such a gathering?
Thank you very much. Like the ACOM president said, even at building site, there should be somebody in charge of safety and emergencies. How much more when you have a congregation where more than 10 persons are gathered? The expectation is the person who is bringing that program together should have medics around them, should seek the cooperation of first aiders that will be on ground. Ambulance services are available almost in all states of the Federation. We have the State Emergency Management Agency who are the first point of contact, who should bring all our stakeholders together, including the hospital medics and the paramedics. Like the case of Yo that we are talking about, it is expected that a congregation like that should have a standby ambulance bay with all facilities and paramedics on ground. But in our way in Nigeria, we hardly want to give importance to some of these things. That's why somebody wants to do a program of 10, 15 hours, he doesn't even think that should be. They say God will take absolute control. What about, we're not the only one worshiping God, of course. While God is taking absolute control, we should follow procedure, get the paramedics, get the medics, get ambulances on standby. There are medical emergencies all over the country. It is encouraged that people who hold programs should please consult with people before they hold such programs that have large population attendance.
Dr. Bandele, how do we reduce avoidable casualties from such, incidents? Because in other parts of the world, you can still find, victims rescued from under the rubble, even days after the incident. But here it's not the case. Some of the posts of the incident in Uyo, you could hear people shouting, "Don't touch, don't touch, don't touch that, don't touch that." So how can we, rescue, conduct a search and rescue operations without, of course, inflicting more casualties?
Yeah, like I said, it is the procedure that is not in place in some of the states. The idea is when such a building collapses, we have the Nigerian police for providing security, the emergency services moving with their equipment to help rescue those who are trapped. But in Nigeria, the greatest problem we have are the bystanders.
To elaborate on what you recommend or what is recommended professionally as evacuation procedure in any eventuality. But let's also bring in now Architect Umar Liu, once again President of the Architect Registration Council of Nigeria. From what we know in terms of reports, just to say,
he was not contacted again. And that from what he saw, with the span and the type of load that is expected to be transmitted down, what he found in the concrete, the size of the reinforcement, that he didn't know when he shouted, because he couldn't believe it. Said, yes, I'm not processes. When you initiate your design as the architect, you go to the client, then you pass to the structural engineer, electrical, mechanical, all to make their input. Just as Professor Dada said.
Yes. And eyewitness said that the structure caved in, the U structure caved in when people started dancing. So what could have happened?
In fact, not only that, I was even told that before the owner of the building asked them to remove, because there were propping the roof, he said they should remove. They said before then, few days before then, it sagged, and they went and used prop to give you semblance of being okay.
Oh.
Yes. So you can see the criminality in everything that he wants people to see him when he's being coronated or whatever.
All right, Architect Umar Ali, thanks a lot, as well as the other guests. Just to indicate that we have reactions already coming in from our viewers. We'll take those tweets now. Oladimeji Olane, your tweets.
Let me take toothpick and... According to Professor Tranquilizer, I am disappointed, aghast, crestfallen, and vanquished at your shameful display.
This week on your award-winning comedy series, Professor John Bull, starring Kanayo Okanayo, Mercy Johnson, Queen Wokoye, Yomi Fast Lanso, Oguz Baba.
I'd like to see Mr. Udo Etu.
Right, this is Good Morning Nigeria on the NTA, and we're discussing building collapse in Nigeria and safety of mega structures. We still have our guests here. Architect Umar Ali is still here, Engineer Kasim Ali, Dr. Nimode Bandele, as well as Professor Martin Dada. Gentlemen, of course, Kingsley, you're still here. We're looking at, how to... Honestly, I'm tongue-tied, Engineer Ali. I was asking just before we came on set, if there's a law, in the current law, does not permit holding, events, conducting events within an uncompleted structure or a structure that is still, in progress, then that, implicates current in this matter.
Not current implicated. There's the HSE procedure. It's not even about holding events, like I said earlier. And area where there's construction work going on is a regimented area. Somebody takes responsibility. The person in charge of that project, he determines who comes in and who goes out, and how you come in and how you go out, and what equipment you need to. Like I talked about, even whether the kind of vehicle you can use to come in, if it's a large premises, or what you wear to come in. Those are fundamental. So if that is violated, that is already an issue. Those responsible, the person who gives permission for them to come in has a case to answer. For those who came in, well, of course they can't hold them because they didn't know they are permitted to come in. But if they didn't permit them to come in, that would be another issue. Those are matters for investigation anyway. But the point I'm making is that over the years, we have taken some of these things for granted in our country. You have, in fact, if there's an accident in Nigeria today, those who go ahead to even take charge are not those who have any knowledge of the process. I have a victim of an accident many years ago, and because of that, I chosen to help each time I see an accident. 2 times I've been at accident scene. People will gather and just be looking, hey, yeah. And one time when someone a young man had an accident, was totally brutalized in blood, and people were just looking at him. I said, can you just let me take him into my car and take him to the hospital? In the process, somebody stole my phone. You see, the people who come around, and that is what happens everywhere. People, some go there not really because they want to help, and they've no even capacity.
Well, Engineer Kasim, thanks. Let's return to Professor Martin Dada at Lagos Network Studios. Professor Dada, one of the tweets talked about the use of substandard materials. What is the role of, let's say this time we're having a professional builder on site. Materials come in, what should be the role of a professional builder? Because sometimes when you go to buy materials from the construction material dealers, one of the questions they will ask you is whether it is your personal project or whether it's a contract. And from there, they want to supply you materials that below par if it's a contract, and then if it is your own, say, okay, this one I better pass, so this is the amount you're going to pay for it. What should be the role? First, purchasing of materials, and then acceptance of those materials at the point of construction.
Of the question, I actually want to join the question and add it to what the current president just spoke. I'm a builder registered by the Council of Registered Builders of Nigeria. Now, the issue about purchasing of materials is the current president said something. He says person in charge, the person in charge of construction. What we want to talk to Nigerians directly is that as far as the laws of the Federal Republic of Nigeria is concerned, it is the builder that manages the construction, the production of a building in the Federal Republic of Nigeria. He is the person in charge. And oftentimes we have problem of nomenclature. I was reading, even the recent collapse, they say builders on the run. I'm afraid a builder is not anybody on site. It's somebody licensed by the Carbon Law, which is a law of the Federal Republic, not about purchasing of material. That's why I raised it that our issue, we should not be having piecemeal approach. For goodness sake, what I want to tell us in Nigeria, our viewers, is that we must join the advocacy quickly for the passing of the law, for the enforcement of the National Building Code. For example, you're talking about materials. What happens in material? Material is just a subset of what can cause a collapse. The current president spoke of design, the architect spoke of design, but oftentimes even design can be okay and failure can still happen. Now, what we do in issue of material is what we call, which is recognized in the National Building Code. There's what we call the Project Quality Management Plan. The part of the plan, there are things in the plan that talks about conformance, non-conformance, non-conforming substances. As a matter of fact, the plan will tell us the means of communication. What are the things you go to reject? What are the things you go to accept? How do you integrate the materials? And what I want to go, I talk, and I'm so happy the other presidents are here. We are passionate about Nigeria. People are losing their lives. The National Building Code was in 2006. There was a collapse in Lagos before eventually it was agreed upon in Kano. Now, some of these are encapsulated and captured in the code. Now, so if I'm going to buy a material, there are procedures. There are things that are specified by the designers. Then there is a way we have to check that it meets tests, inspections, and approvals. What our country, what some people in Nigeria know about is just going to test reinforcement, you're going to test cube, you're going to test your water. But there are inspection, there are approval, there are processes. The architect does his own, the structurer does his own, but where we meet it, and that's the area I want to passionately talk about, is that oftentimes we'll be talking of contractor. The National Building Code, even our training, put a responsibility on professionals. The contractor is just a business person. It could be you, sir. It could be any Nigerian listening to me. But the challenge has been that when they get political connections, they get a contract, a business administration graduate says it's good hand. From now, let Nigerians be asking, when you are on a building project, who is handling that project? Is it a registered builder? Yes, the other professionals have part to play. They've got to inspect in line with their inputs. The architect will say, my 6 meter, is it 6 meter? The structural engineer will say, the R10 at reinforcement at 200, is it like that? It doesn't meet the test. But how it is put together, the assemblage, even if you put a bomb in a building and you want us to build a bunker, the builder has to do
it. Then you, from day one, minimize. But of course, we know there are compromises left, right, and center. Just like you said, when you go to procure this material, they ask you, is it contract or your personal? If it is contract, some will even say, they will tell you point blank, do you want original or imitation? When you say you want original, they say this is it. By the time they tell you the price of the imitation, you are tempted to go for the imitation. I'm saying that, be that as it may, even when it is brought to site, both the architects, the engineers, insist on conduction of tests to ascertain that what they specified is what is being put into the field.
Okay, Architect Aliu, thank you. Let's quickly take our tweets now. I'm trying to beat that time now. Duke are gonna tweet, ordinarily playing loud music in completed house is risky. What more of fresh one that's one building under construction, and loudspeakers during praises. Unfortunate.
And then Gilbert Ayam has this tweet. I believe oftentimes it's due to poor structural design or no design at all. When clients refuse to pay for designs, what do you expect?
All right. Samuel Edet Akman tweets, if they put the casualties on those figures, what will they say about my good neighbor that left and hasn't returned till today?
Otega, I think the Uyo building collapse should be a lesson to Nigerians to embrace quality building materials. And
Gilbert Ayam tweets, I'm sorry to say this bitter truth. Cohen is not doing their job in this country. When a carpenter is the engineer on site, what do you expect?
And then Atubang Friday, our manufacturer